Prologue. Darkness in Karlsruhe. 'Tis the high noon of night, October 15th, 1812. Hark to the tread of the 12 hours as they pass on the palace clock. The vast corridors are still. In the shadows lurk two burly minions of ambitious crime, Burkhard and Sauerbeck. Is that a white moving shadow which approaches through the gloom? There arises a shriek, a heavy body falls. 'Tis a lackey who has seen and recognized the White Lady of the Grand Ducal House, who walks before the deaths of princes. Burkhard and Sauerbeck spurn the inanimate body of the menial witness. The white figure, bearing in her arms a sleeping child, glides to the tapestried wall and vanishes through it into the chamber of the Crown Prince, a babe of 14 days. She returns carrying another unconscious infant form. She places it in the hands of the ruffian Sauerbeck. She disappears. The miscreant speeds with the child into the park. You hear the trample of 4 horses and the roll of the carriage on the road. Next day there is silence in the palace, broken but by the shrieks of a bereaved mother. The Crown Prince has died in the night. 16 years fleet by, years rich in royal crimes. 'Tis 4 of a golden wit Monday afternoon in old Nuremburg, May 26th, 1828. The town lies empty, dusty, silent. Her merry people are rejoicing in the green wood and among the suburban beer gardens. One man alone, a shoemaker, stands by the door of his house. Around him lie the vacant streets of the sleeping city. His eyes rest on the form, risen as it were out of the earth or fallen from the skies, of a boy, strangely clad, speechless, incapable either of standing erect or of moving his limbs. That boy is the royal infant placed of yore by the white shadow in the hands of the cloaked ruffian. Thus does the Crown Prince of Baden return from the darkness to the daylight. He names himself Kaspar Hauser, the child of Europe.
The story of the boy Kaspar Hauser, who appeared as if from the clouds in Nuremberg in 1828, divided Germany into hostile parties and caused legal proceedings as late as 1883. From whence this lad came and what his previous adventures had been has never been ascertained. His death by a dagger wound in 1833, whether inflicted by his own hand or that of another, deepened the mystery. According to one view, the boy was only a waif and an impostor who had strayed from some peasant home where nobody desired his return. According to the other theory, he was the Crown Prince of Baden, stolen as an infant in the interests of a junior branch of the house, reduced to imbecility by systematic ill-treatment, turned loose on the world at the age of 16, and finally murdered, lest his secret origin might be discovered. On all sides, indeed, the evidence as to Kaspar Hauser is in bewildering confusion. In 1832, 4 years after his appearance, a book about him was published by Paul von Feuerbach, quoting Feuerbach's romantic narrative of 1832.
The citizen went to the boy, who showed him a letter directed to the captain of a cavalry regiment. The gallant captain lived near the new gate, and thither the young peasant walked with the citizen. At the house, the captain being out, the boy said, "I would be a horseman as my father was." Eventually, the boy was taken to the town magistrate and housed in the Nuremberg jail with the jailer's family. George Whiteman, shoemaker, swore that on May 26, 1828, he saw Kaspar trudging down a hilly street, shouting "Hi," and presently asking, with tolerable distinctness, "Newgate Street?" He took the boy that way, and the boy gave him the letter for the captain. Weichmann said that they had better ask for him at the Newgate guardhouse, and the boy said, "Guardhouse? Guardhouse. Newgate, no doubt, just built." He said he came from Ratisbonne and was in Nuremberg for the first time. The letter carried by the boy said that the writer first took charge of him in 1812 and had never let him take a single step out of my house.
In the same hand was a letter in Latin characters purporting to come from Kaspar's mother, a poor girl, as the author of the German letter was a poor day laborer. Even among those who consider Kaspar to be a humbug, no one can be sure that he wrote these pieces. If not, somebody else was in the affair, somebody who wanted to get rid of Kaspar. As that youth was a useless, false and hysterical patient, no one was likely to want to keep him. How Kaspar fell, as it were, from the clouds and unseen into the middle of Nuremberg, even on a holiday when almost everyone was out of town, is certainly a puzzle. The earliest witnesses took him for a journeyman tailor lad, and perhaps nobody paid any attention to a dusty travelling tradesman or groom out of place. Feuerbach says that his feet were covered with blisters. The jailer says that they were merely swollen by the tightness of his boots. Once in prison, Kaspar, according to Feuerbach, adopted the role of a semi-unconscious animal, playing with toy horses. He could only eat bread and water. Meat made him shudder. Yet not long after, he wrote a detailed account of all that he had then observed. This is Feuerbach's story, but it is contradicted by Kaspar himself in writing. Feuerbach reports that Kaspar was taught to write by the jailer's little boy, although it is an undeniable fact that he could write when he came in the same hand as the author of his mysterious letter. Though he had but half a dozen words on May 26th, by July 7th he had furnished his history. Later in 1828 he was able to write that history himself. In 1829 he completed a work of autobiography. Kaspar wrote that till the age of 16 he was kept in a prison, perhaps 6 or 7 feet long, 4 broad and 5 high. There were 2 small windows with closed black wooden shutters. He lay on straw, lived on bread and water, and played with toy horses and blue and red ribbons. That he could see colours in total darkness is a proof of his inconsistent fables or of his abnormal acuteness of the senses. The man who kept him was not less hyper-aesthetic, for he taught Kaspar to write in the dark. He never heard any noise, but avers that in prison he was alarmed by the town clock striking. On the first morning, Feuerbach says that he did not hear the bells for several days, such as Kaspar's written account from 1829, the published account of July 1828. Derived from the expressions of a half-dumb animal, as Feuerbach puts it, is much more prolix in detail. He had sat on the ground and never seen daylight till he came to Nuremberg. He used to be drugged with water of an evil taste and wake in a clean shirt. The man once hit him and hurt him for making too much noise. The man taught him his letters and the Arabic numerals. Later he gave him instructions in the art of standing. He told one biographer that his windows were shuttered. He told the jailer that from his windows he saw a pile of wood and above at the top of a tree. Obviously, Kaspar's legends about himself, whether spoken in June 1828 or written in February 1829, are absurdly false. He was for 3 weeks in the tower and was daily visited by the curious. Yet in these 3 weeks, the half-conscious animal learned to read tolerably well. To count to right figures, he made progress in writing a good hand and learned a simple tune on the harpsichord. In July 1828, after being adopted by the excited town of Nuremberg, he was sent to be educated by and live with a schoolmaster named Dömer and was studied by Feuerbach. They found in Kaspar a splendid example of the sensitive and a noble proof of the powers of animal magnetism. In Germany at this time, much was talked and written about the hypnotic state and about a kind of animal magnetism that, in accordance with Mesmer's theory, was supposed to pass between stars, metals, magnets, and human beings. Now Kaspar was really a sensitive, or feigned to be one, with hysterical cunning. Anything unusual would throw him into convulsions or reduce him to unconsciousness. He was addicted to the tears of sensibility. Years later, Meyer read to him an account of the biblical deluge, and he wept bitterly. Meanwhile, the boy was in the hands of men credulous, curious, and in the case of Dömer, capable of odd sensations induced by suggestion. From such a boy, in such company, the truth could not be expected, above all, if he was subject to dissociation and obliviousness as to his own past. Kaspar had for months been the pet mystery of Nuremberg. People were sure that Kaspar was some great one, kept out of his own. Some thought him a son of Napoleon, others averred that he was the infant son of the Grand Duke Karl of Baden. The babe, they claimed, had not died within a fortnight of his birth, but had been spirited away by a lady disguised as the spectral White Lady of Bodden, an aristocratic banshee. The subtle conspirators had bred the Grand Duke Kaspar in a dark den, the theory ran, hoping that he would prove by virtue of such education to be an acceptable recruit for the Bavarian cavalry, and that no questions would be asked. Unluckily, questions were now being asked, for a boy who could only occasionally see and hear was not a useful man on a patrol. At least the military authorities thought not. The promising young Hussar was thus left in the hands of civilians. The Grand Ducal secret might be discovered, so an assassin was sent to take off the young prince. On October 17, 1829, Kaspar did not come to midday eating, but was found weltering in his blood in the cellar of Domer's house. He had an inconsiderable wound on the forehead. Feuerbach thinks that the murderer had made a shot at Kaspar's throat with a razor, that Kaspar ducked cleverly, and got it on the brow, and that the assassin believed his crime to be consummated, and fled after uttering words in which Kaspar recognized the voice of his tutor. No suspicious character was observed. Herr Domer, before this cruel outrage, had remarked in Kaspar a highly regrettable tendency to dissimulation and untruthfulness, and just before the attack had told the pupil that he was a humbug. Lord Stanhope quoted a paper of Domer's in the Allgemeine Zeitung of February 6, 1834, in which he says that lying and deceit were become to Kaspar a second nature. In any case, Domer clove to the romantic theory of Kaspar's origin. Kaspar left Domer's house and stayed with various good people, being accompanied by a policeman in his walks. In his new homes, Kaspar lied terribly, was angry when detected, and wounded himself with a pistol after being reproached for shirking his studies. He was very vain, very agreeable, as long as no one found fault with him, very lazy and very sentimental. In May 1831, Lord Stanhope, who since the attack on Kaspar in 1829 had been curious about him, came to Nuremberg and took up the hero with fantastic fondness. Though he recognized Kaspar's fanciful tendencies, he believed him to be the victim of some nefarious criminals and offered a reward of 500 florins for information. It never was claimed. Lord Stanhope still hoped that he had been terrorized into falsehood. He could not believe both that his guardian had never spoken to Kaspar in his prison, and also that the man always taught me to do what I was told. To Lord Stanhope, Kaspar averred that the man with whom he had always lived said nothing to him till he was on his journey. Yet during his imprisonment, the man had taught him, he declared, the phrases which by his account were all the words that he knew when he arrived at Nuremberg. For these and other obvious reasons, Lord Stanhope, though he had relieved Nuremberg of Kaspar in November 1831 and made ample provision for him, was deeply sceptical about his narrative. Lord Stanhope did not adopt him, but undertook to pay for his maintenance and left him in January 1832 under the charge of a Dr. Meyer. Finding him incurably untruthful, the doctor ceased to provoke him by comments on his inaccuracies, and Kaspar got a small apartment of his own. With this he was much dissatisfied, for he, like Feuerbach, had expected Lord Stanhope to take him to England. On December 9, 1833, Meyer was much provoked by Kaspar's inveterate falseness, and said that he did not know how to face Lord Stanhope, who was expected to visit Ansbach at Christmas. For some weeks, Kaspar had been sulky, and there had been questions about a journal which he was supposed to keep. He was now especially resentful. On 2 earlier occasions, after a scene with his tutor, Kaspar had been injured, once by the assassin who cut his forehead, and once by a pistol accident. On December 14th, he rushed into Dr. Meyer's room, pointed to his side, and led Meyer to a place distant about 500 yards from his house. So agitated was he that Meyer would go no further, especially as Kaspar would answer no questions. On their return, Kaspar said, "Went court garden man, had a knife, gave a bag, struck, I ran as I could, bag must lie there." Kaspar was found to have a narrow wound, 2.5 inches under the center of the left breast, clearly caused by a very sharp, double-edged weapon. In 3 or 4 days he died as the heart had been injured. He was able to depose that on the morning of the 14th, a man in a blouse, who had addressed him some days earlier, brought him a verbal message from the court gardener, asking him to come and view some clay from a newly bored well, where in fact no work was being done at this time. Here a man came forward, gave him a bag, stabbed him, and fled. Of the man, he gave discrepant descriptions. He became incoherent and died. There was snow lying when Kaspar was stabbed, but there were no footmarks near the well, and elsewhere, only one man's track was in the Hofgarten. Lord Stanhope suggested that Kaspar himself had inflicted the wound by pressure, and that after he had squeezed the point of the knife through his wadded coat, it had penetrated much deeper than he had intended. A very probable hypothesis. As for the bag which the assassin gave him, it was found, and Dr. Meyer said that it was very like a bag which he had seen in Kaspar's possession. Nothing is certain, except that Kaspar was an hysterical humbug who people have since suspected from the first, and whom believers in animal magnetism and homeopathy accepted as some great one, educated by his royal enemies in total darkness to fit him for the military profession. The fable about a Prince of Baden had not a single shred of evidence in its favor. It is true that the Grand Duchess was too ill to be permitted to see her dead baby in 1812, but the baby's father, grandmother and aunt, with court physicians, the nurses and others, must have seen it, and it is too absurd to suppose that they were all parties to the plot. Abject credulity, love of mystery, love of scandal, and political passions produced the ludicrous mass of fables to which, as late as 1893, blamed Lord Stanhope for Kaspar's murder.